Thank you. So, as you now all know, we're going to be recording this webinar and we'll be posting it later on our website. So welcome to a new series of webinars during which the CPC and its technical consultant, CTC, will share changes to the program requirements and processes to implement the restructuring policy notice issued by NTIA on June 6, 2025. Next slide, please. So for today's webinar, on our agenda, we will be covering an overview of the federal changes to the BEAD rules, a revised timeline for both a pre-qualification and a project application window, some updates on the unlicensed fixed wireless, a little bit more about pre-qualification window, about pre-qualification application changes, and the benefit of the bargain round application or the project application window we will be opening. Next slide, please. Before we get started, a few housekeeping things for those of you who may be new to Zoom. We have several different features on it. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A window. Note that we will not be answering questions live today, but we will be taking the questions and adding the ones of broad applicability to our frequently asked questions, which we should be updating issuing a new version next week. For those of you who desire, there's a closed caption feature. It's the rectangular box that's marked CC. You click it on, click it off. And we recommend for the best viewing experience, which we will be sharing slides today, to choose the side-by-side speaker version, side-by-side speaker view. Next slide, please. I'm now going to turn it over to Joanne, Hovis, who is president of CTC, and who will tell us about the federal changes to the BEAD rules. Thank you, Joanne.
Thanks, Jonathan. Are you hearing me all right?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Great. Okay. I always want to confirm that. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be with you all today. I'm going to give you first an overview of the considerable federal changes that were released, as Jonathan said, on June 6th through the policy notice that required restructuring by all the states and territories of their BEAD programs. And then we'll launch into a little bit more detail. Can I have the next slide, please? So June 6th represented the date that NTIA released the outcome of the review that was done by Commerce Secretary Lutnick and his team over the months from Inauguration Day until June 6th. They had spoken about the review that was being done for restructuring of the program, and then on the 6th, a 23-page document was released, the policy notice, which is now the governing document for the BEAD program. There is a link on this page to the policy notice. It's also very easy to find on the NTIA website. And if you are an applicant to the BEAD program in California, I strongly recommend that this is a document you should read. As I mentioned, it's relatively brief. It's only 23 pages, but it is the most consequential document for understanding what the BEAD process is going to look like in coming weeks and what the outcome might be and the timeline for the outcome. Notably, everything that is in the policy notice, where it contradicts any state's existing initial proposal or rules that came from NTIA, it now is governing, but on any topic on which it is silent, the initial proposal prepared by the state is the governing document. But as you'll see, it's a pretty comprehensive document for some of the key things that will be of interest for applicants. Can I have the next page, please? A few of the notable changes that are particularly consequential as you start thinking about preparing your applications for the BEAD program in California or revising and updating applications that you filed under the earlier rules. The first one is that there were certain requirements that were not in the statute that created BEAD, but that had been included in the BEAD program by NTIA under the previous administration. And these have now been eliminated as requirements for applicants, for awardees of the BEAD program. These include things like middle-class affordability plans, certain kinds of labor and workforce development requirements, climate reporting, net neutrality, and open access. And then those have been eliminated. Other elements have been simplified relative to how they were treated under the previous administration. That includes the low-cost service offering. What you will see is that these changes will be reflected in the application, that there are certain questions that are no longer necessary or allowed because they related to these previous requirements that no longer exist. And the application and application guide are designed to make it very easy for you to understand where those changes are. And you'll see that when the materials are released. The second notable change to the BEAD program under the policy notice is for something that the administration calls technology neutrality. As you will recall, the statute creates different treatment for different categories of technology in the BEAD program. Projects that meet certain performance requirements are called priority projects, and states are mandated to consider those first. And then projects that do not meet those performance requirements for priority projects are considered non-priority, and they are still eligible for funding, but they have to be considered after priority projects. What the new rules do is it requires that states consider all broadband technologies as potentially priority, and then evaluate each application on an application by application, project by project basis to determine whether the proposed project in the proposed location actually meets the definition of priority. So an entirely new area of analysis and requirement for the states, and new showings that applicants have to make if they would like to be considered as priority applications. We'll have lots more detail on this next week, but just so that you know, this is one of the key changes. That technologies are no longer automatically categorized as priority or non-priority. Each application has to demonstrate that it is priority, and the state has to consider that demonstration and make a determination. The third critical element that is particularly relevant for today's conversation is that states have to reopen their qualification processes, and that is launching today in California. Applicants that did not apply to be qualified, pre-qualified in the last round are now able to do so if they would like to. Those who were found to be not qualified in the last round, or where there was no determination, are also eligible to apply. So if you have not yet pre-qualified with California, this is your opportunity to submit qualification materials, and that window opens today. The next element of the changes that is notable in the restructuring policy notice is that each state is required to conduct another bidding round that is called the benefit of the bargain round. And benefit of the bargain is the term that is used by the Department of Commerce to refer to the administration's desire to get the best possible pricing and to create as much competition as possible. So each state is in the process of or will shortly conduct a subgrantee selection round for all BEAD eligible locations that are designed to get a full range of applications in to make selections. And all selections will be based on the benefit of the bargain round and related activities, not based on any decisions or selections that were made previously. There is a new scoring rubric and a new selection process. The old scoring rubric, which had a range of different factors in it that were mandated by the federal government, has been entirely eliminated. There's a new scoring mechanism that is focused on minimum BEAD outlay, meaning cost. And then in some cases, and we'll talk about this more as we get closer to the benefit of the bargain round opening. In some cases, there is a secondary scoring opportunity where applications are within 15% of each other. The new rules allow for scoring based on secondary criteria, not only based on cost. But it's important to note that cost is now the driving scoring criterion among priority applications that go through the review process and are found to be priority under the definition that is in the statute. Finally, and just as consequentially as everything else, there is a 90-day timeline for states to comply with all of these requirements. And that 90 days began on June 6th when the program rules in the policy notice were first released. So that clock is obviously ticking, and it's important to know that this process is moving very fast, not only for all of the applicants, but also for the states. Can I have the next slide, please? So let's talk about that timeline in a little bit more detail. The plan in California is that for purposes of pre-qualification, there will be a window that has opened today and will close at 6 p.m. Pacific on July 17th. As I said before, if you are not yet pre-qualified and you would like to participate in the BEAD program in California, this window is the opportunity for submitting your qualification materials. I saw Jonathan come onto the screen, so let me defer to him here.
That's fine, Joanne. Thank you for starting out. Just wanted to go through our revised schedule. So as Joanne mentioned, the pre-qualification window is open currently. We just have confirmation that it's open and available to everyone, and we'll be closing on July 17th, 2025. There's more information on our website, but if anyone's already been approved has already had their pre-qualification application approved, no additional action is necessary. For those entities, for all other entities, additional steps will be needed, and they're outlined on our website. On July 19th, we will be opening the benefit of the bargain round, which is another round to submit project applications, and all project applications that were previously submitted will be available to be modified by applicants if they want to, and will need to be resubmitted. That window closes on August 2nd at 6 p.m. Pacific. And I also wanted to mention that yesterday, on Thursday, July 10th, 2025, the CPUC issued a proposed decision that would modify the BEAD program rules adopted in decisions 2405, 029, and 2409, 050. That is the decisions that adopted the initial proposal Volume 1 and Volume 2, respectively. In addition, the proposed decision confirms that the Commission will consider the final proposal through a draft resolution with a shortened comment period. We encourage everyone to review the proposed decision and to file comments if they so choose. When we post these slides on our website, we will include a link to the proposed decision. Next slide, please. So as Joanne mentioned, a very critical element to the restructuring notice is that it provides 90 days or until September 4th, 2025 for eligible entities, state broadband offices, to be able to revise the program rules, reopen the pre-qualification, and conduct a benefit of the bargain, make it subgrantee selection. So that is all that needs to occur, and we will be issuing a draft resolution, and all that will happen before September 4th, 2025. So we are aware that NTIA has provided an opportunity for eligible entities to submit an extension request to the NTIA if it appears additional time is necessary to ensure a robust subgrantee selection process while conforming with the requirements of California law. As an agency, we are reviewing the necessity of seeking an extension, but at this point have no updates on any possible extensions. I'll turn the presentation back over to Joanne to go over more information about pre-qual and the benefit of the bargain round. Thank you, Joanne.
Thanks, Jonathan. Can I have the next slide, please? All right, let's talk now about the unlicensed fixed wireless data updates. And the next slide, please. Just by way of background, the policy notice changes certain policies that had been adopted in the previous administration, and specifically finds that unlicensed fixed wireless may, based on adequate evidence and showing, may qualify as BEAD eligible service. And the policy notice requires states to allow unlicensed fixed wireless providers to provide evidence of where they may have BEAD sufficient service for locations that are shown as eligible for BEAD funding. And by providing evidence with regard to those locations, to potentially have those locations removed from the BEAD eligible map because they are served by that unlicensed fixed wireless provider. So in compliance with the very specific requirements of the policy notice, the CPUC posted a notice on June 18th, allowing unlicensed fixed wireless providers to provide the relevant data regarding their BEAD eligible locations that are shown in the FCC's broadband data collection system with technology code 70. So essentially that are showing those locations as served on the FCC map. And then under the NTIA's rules, the CPUC gave those unlicensed fixed wireless providers 7 calendar days to notify the CPUC that they intended to provide that data and that showing of where they have service to BEAD eligible locations. And then they had the opportunity of 7 more days in which to submit the requested evidence of their service into the BEAD portal that is managed by the CPUC. The review of that data is currently underway to determine whether the data provided by the unlicensed fixed wireless service providers does indeed demonstrate that there is service to a location that is considered BEAD eligible, but that possibly should be removed from the BEAD eligibility map based on the existing service from the unlicensed fixed wireless provider. That process is underway now, and the map will then be updated to remove any locations that qualify and where that evidence has been provided and reviewed and is found to be sufficient. Can I have the next slide, please? So that is some of the data work that has been underway, in addition to the other things that Jonathan mentioned, over the past few weeks since the policy notice was released. In addition, the CPUC has been preparing to reopen the pre-qualification application as an opportunity for potential applicants, as well as preparing for the benefit of the bargain round. But let's first talk about pre-qualification. The BEAD restructuring policy notice has some pretty clear requirements in this regard, and their revisions have taken place in recent weeks. The new pre-qualification phase opened today and will close on the 17th at 6 o'clock Pacific time. If you are an applicant who was found qualified in the previous pre-qualification application, you remain pre-qualified. Nothing has changed about that, and you need not submit any more information. Your qualification from the first round will be used in this round, in the benefit of the bargain round as well. Can I have the next slide, please? If, however, you did not submit in the first round, or you did not get a qualified finding in the first round, you may now submit for pre-qualification in the current round, which, as I said, opened today, and notably will only be open until the 17th. If this is something you're intending to do, please act fast to make sure that you're able to submit all your materials in the time that is available. So how does the pre-qualification application look different to the earlier one? It is different in small ways that reflect the changes to the BEAD program as required by the policy notice. For example, the questions that are no longer permitted under the restructuring policy notice, and these are largely focused on those extra statutory policy considerations that I was talking about earlier, having to do with things like climate reporting, net neutrality, and so on. Those questions have been eliminated from the pre-qualification application for new applicants that are applying for pre-qualification. Those applicants that previously applied, their responses on those questions will be disregarded because the questions are no longer permitted. And any commitments that were implied by those responses no longer apply because those are no longer permitted under the new BEAD rules. It's really important to know that the CPUC is still required to establish that every applicant that it qualifies for the BEAD program has the financial, technical, managerial, and operational capabilities that are necessary to be able to deliver on their BEAD commitments. And the pre-qualification application is all about that. The pre-qualification application for BEAD is not about specific projects that you might apply for. It is about the capabilities of the entity that will apply in order to qualify that entity, and then limit the application for specific projects to the project itself rather than to the entity that is seeking that project. Importantly, as we've noted multiple times, we are working with a significantly compressed timeline that is mandated by the federal requirements. And so the instructions for changes will be noted as an update to the pre-qualification application guide. And you will see that in red line and in a change log. So it will be very easy to identify how the pre-qualification application has changed, how it looks different to the earlier one, in that it will be shown in a red line form and with a change log. Can I have the next slide, please? Let's talk now about the benefit of the bargain round, and there will be considerably more information shared in the near term as we gear up to launch that round quite shortly, as Jonathan noted. Let's start with applicants who provided project applications in the earlier round. If you did do that, you will have the opportunity to update that application and make changes to it rather than having to submit the application on an entirely new basis. There will be new information that is necessary. There's additional information required because of the changed federal rules. The CPUC has to request additional information. And so that will be requested, and all applicants, whether they're submitting an entirely new application or updating an existing old application, all applicants must submit that application in the portal. There is action necessary for all entities, whether they are providing a new application or are just going to use their old application with updates and additions. There'll be considerable more information about the elements, the process, and the requirements of the benefit of the bargain round. They'll be published to the CPUC BEAD website before the round opens on July 19th. And the CPUC is working to develop as much informational content as possible to enable applicants to be able to efficiently and expeditiously provide applications and succeed in the available timeline. Can I have the next slide? All right, I am now effectively repeating myself, but the same point. If you have submitted already, your application will be reopened for revisions and you can make changes to that application. And then you will need to submit it with the supplemental information that is necessary. New applicants must go through the pre-qualification process and may then also apply for submit new applications for specific projects. Importantly, let me note there will be considerably more information released on this shortly, but if you are, as I hope you are, already planning your applications and thinking about your application strategy and the area for which you would like to apply, it's important to note that the project area unit structure of census block groups and tribal lands remains part of the program. That is not changed by the benefit of the bargain rules that were released by NTIA on June 6th. So applicants will still have the opportunity, as they did in the first round, to assemble their applications based on combining project area units that are adjacent to each other into a single application. However, NTIA's rules allow applicants to be able to remove select high-cost locations if they so choose, and so there will not be a 100% coverage requirement in any given project area unit. And for those of you who are already starting to plan, design, and put together the component parts of an application, which is great because things are moving very fast, and so taking advantage of this time now makes a lot of sense. For those of you who are doing that, you should know that the project area unit is still the core unit for assembling your proposed grant area, but does not have to be at 100% coverage. Can I have the next slide, please? So the list of eligible locations for the program will be updated on the portal prior to the benefit of the bargain round opening. The changes to the program will be based on NTIA's new requirements. They will include the outcome of the unlicensed fixed wireless analysis that we talked about just a few minutes ago, and will also include a certain number of changes based on changing federal data on the FCC map, as well as locations where there have been defaults on particular commitments under federal programs or otherwise, so locations that will become eligible. Please continue to keep an eye on the CPUC website as information will be updated there. Can I have the next slide? I've pointed out multiple times, as did Jonathan, that we are working on a very tight timeline. Every state in the country is doing so. The federal government has required that this entire process happen on an accelerated timeline. And that puts considerable pressure on the timeline for how much time is available for applicants to submit their applications and for the CPUC to review their applications. The timeline pressure applies to all. It is really important to note that the timeline does not allow for revisions to correct errors and omissions or anything else like that. It's critical to note that an application that has omissions or inaccuracy will not have opportunity for revision and may be found non-compliant and disqualified from participation. As a result, we ask, please, we know that time is short, but please make sure that applications are complete and accurate and compliant, because there won't be opportunity once the application has been submitted to come in and make those changes later. Can I have the next slide, please? All right, the email address for submitting questions that will be responded to through an FAQ document is here on the slide, beadgrant@cpuc.ca.gov. And let me now turn it back over to Jonathan. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. I just wanted to mention a couple items as we close out today's webinar. First and foremost, as Joanne mentioned, we'll be publishing a lot more material on our website about the project application window and the rest of the activities to meet the September 4th deadline. I do want to mention that we will be having a webinar next Thursday, July 17th from 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. It'll provide an overview of the restructured BEAD project applications. The registration link will be coming shortly and encourage everyone to attend that. We also will have an additional webinar, at least one more webinar, probably more than that, but at least one more webinar once the project application window has gone live to kind of do a demo of what the revised project application looks like in the grants management solution. As I mentioned previously, we're recording the questions that are being submitted today in the question and answer function. We will be adding those questions to a revised frequently asked questions that we anticipate issuing next week. There's a lot more information that's going to be coming out, so please feel free to submit questions to beadgrant@cpuc.ca.gov. We will do our best to answer questions as quickly as we can, but of course, there's probably going to be a lot of questions in a short amount of time period, so we ask for your patience. We also understand that a timely response is critical to people submitting their applications. Next slide, please. As a reminder, the NTIA's BEAD restructuring policy notice and the CPUC BEAD subgrantee selection page are excellent places to go to look for additional information. We will be posting this webinar after we conclude today. The recording usually lags a couple days behind that, so I would expect the recording will be up next week. I think that's, are there any other slides in the presentation? That's it. So that concludes our webinar today. We want to thank everyone for joining us today and for your continued participation in the BEAD program. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar, which again is July 17th at 1 p.m. Thank you.